Welcome to Kicking Ass and Taking Names, the Business Owners Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Marlon Griffith Esquire. Join us on this podcast journey as we help you break free from the grind and get your business to work for you. We will delve into impactful conversations with business owners, corporate leaders, professional service providers, and industry innovators that will provide you with insights and actionable strategies that will transform your entrepreneurial path, boost your success, and put you in control of your business journey so you can kick ass and take names. Welcome to episode 9 of Kicking Ass and Taking Names. I'm your host, Marlon Griffith. I got my man, Chad Baker, is my guest this week. Chad, as I refer to him, is a sales process expert. As I've said to you all in one of my previous podcasts, there's no business without business. And how do you get business? Sales, sell. And Chad is going to kind of talk to us about how you can develop a effective sales process for your company. Chad, please tell my audience about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, we can get, I guess, into the backstory, but kind of to clarify a little bit, to really try to get to the point. I help companies that sell products and services to either move from founder-led or from completely disorganized and unpredictable sales to something that is repeatable and poises them for growth and further scale, whatever it is that their goals happen to be. So I found myself in this position after a long career in many organizations, selling, both from being the only and first salesperson to being inserted as a middle manager. So I've kind of seen it all. I've made all the mistakes. I'm going to make a lot more, but up until today, I feel like I've made all of them. That's one of the best things about sales is it gives you that resilience, the ability to keep moving forward no matter how many hurdles you run up against, but also figuring out when the hurdle is insurmountable and you should find a way to get around it. So all the things that have led me here are all the different experiences that I've had in selling throughout my career. We could take it all the way back. No one really knows how they ended up where they are. Until you really start to think about it, maybe you can piece it together. Grew up in a small town, Hagerstown, Maryland, which I guess is kind of a suburb of DC, kind of a suburb of Baltimore. There were people when I was growing up, and everybody would say they worked down the road. And what they meant was they went to either Baltimore or DC for work. So you wouldn't see them a whole lot until the weekend came around. But, for the most part, a small town community with, your standard services, lawyers, doctors, but not a lot of opportunity outside of, opportunity to jump onto a company and maybe launch a career. So I guess with a lot of people, I was similar in that I kind of knew I wanted to branch out from Hagerstown and move somewhere else. As an adult, this seemed like a logical place because just more opportunity, more business going on here. And I'm outside of DC here on the bleeding edge of suburbia, out in Aldie, Virginia, or kind of on the edge of Ashburn and Aldie, Virginia. So it's been a long career. I just hit 51 on August 31st. I took all of my birthday cards down so they wouldn't be distracting in the back. So
yeah, I know you got that guitar. We're gonna get to that guitar in a minute.
Sure.
But looking at your history, right? Reviewing and preparing for this podcast, you spent over 20 years in sales.
Yes.
At all different levels. And I would like you to, kind of share with us the lessons that you've learned along the way in your life of sales.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to my upbringing. My father was the haberdasher owner in a small town, Hagerstown, Maryland. He had a menswear shop, and he was the guy. There was one other guy in competition. But my dad was really the guy that you went to suit up. He had been in retail his entire life, so I grew up with that, and he had that gift, which you know it when you meet somebody that has that gift. But you were the only person in the room when he talked to you, and
Mm.
I don't know if I got the gift. I try really hard, with eye contact and making sure that
Mm-hmm.
I'm focused. But you'll learn throughout this podcast that I'm a bit of a scatterbrain, and a lot of how I ended up where I am in process and systems is because of those insufficiencies that I realized throughout my career. But he could dial in on you if you walked into his store. He would know exactly what size you were just by looking at you, and he would make you feel like the only person in the world. So
Is
that
that the secret to sales? Is that one of the secrets to make
uh,
the customer
I
feel like they're the only one in the world, only one in the room?
I think it's just a secret to interpersonal relationships in general. That's where it all begins. There's a ton of secrets that aren't really secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Transfer of enthusiasm, making someone feel like you're listening to them, proving to them that you're listening to them. So there's a lot of that. But you never really think your dad knows anything until you get a little older and you're like, okay, that's something I probably should have picked up on earlier. So
We fathers wish that our kids would appreciate that a little bit earlier, as
yeah,
as opposed to when they get older in life to appreciate that we parents, but we dads know a little bit about some of what we're talking about. But
absolutely.
yeah, uh
But
huh.
as a business owner, he also instilled a distinct fear in me around
Mm,
business ownership,
mm,
because he complained about his business every day, and
mm.
he never wanted me to have anything to do with it. Now that got a little different later on in life, but it was a classic father son relationship where he liked the Cowboys because they were America's team at the time, so I liked the Redskins, now the Commanders. He liked jazz, so I went pretty hard at hip hop. But I did come back around to jazz. The One of the sales lessons that I learned in all of that is listening. You see the guitar in the background. Um, Music is everything to me. It's one of the most important things I think in life, definitely in my life.
Mhm.
Just background music and listening. But listening is the key. And he actually drew me into jazz as a kid. I don't play that guitar very well. I'm actually a drummer. Um, I don't like being the man in front. I like
Wow.
I like being the guy in the back, supporting, moving things in a direction, helping everybody. But the key to all that is listening. So he he and I sort of we bonded on that as I got a little bit older,
Mhm.
and that was really all I wanted to do. I wanted to play music. I wanted to be either a jazz or a rock and roll musician. I wanted to play in bands. Had all the bands. We had a little garage band. Played in every band at school. But he wasn't interested in me moving in that direction. He wanted to move me in another direction. But the thing that we bonded on, he did take, when I hit 17, he took me to Blues Alley.
Mm.
Blues Alley,
In
and
DC, of course.
yeah, he took me down there. I grew up on like Jimmy Smith, incredible organ grinder. We had an organ in the house, and he played the organ. So we listened to a lot of Jimmy Smith. He loved
Wow.
Chicago. You remember those old albums,
Yeah.
Chicago. And
Hmm.
I didn't realize it aside from Jimmy Smith, but in Chicago I really liked, and in hip hop I really liked. There was a lot of jazz behind that. He took me to see
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Gary Burton reunion group, and I had no idea, but he played the vibes. So it was kind of like a big rhythm section, and he had Pat Metheny on guitar, and he had this guy Peter Erskine on the drums that
Hmm.
just blew me away. Will Lee, I think he was on David Letterman. He played the bass, and this guy Mitchell Foreman played piano, and I just sat and listened, and
Mm.
and that was really where it hit me. Like the key to what I was doing that I didn't realize I was doing was I
Mm-hmm.
was just listening to everything that was happening. You have to be tuned in to everything that's happening. But if you're going to be in the front, you're the one sort of you're saying all the words. You're sort of you have your face on it. So I always saw myself as kind of the guy in the background where
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna drive this ship. I'm really in charge, but I'm gonna sit back here and do it from back here. So that being a musician, when you really start to contemplate these things, that really led me in this direction. A father in sales, not he wanted me to have something to fall back on, so he wanted to make sure I went to college. I didn't want anything to do with it, so I found my way to Towson University
Mm-hmm.
outside outside of Baltimore. I stayed there for one semester because I was supposed to play in the jazz band. And in order to get onto the A band, you had to play in the B band. And in order to play in the B band, you had to have a private lesson every week. And it conflicted with my chemistry, like my chemistry 101 class, because he really thought I should be a doctor. He didn't catch on to the fact that I wasn't all that bright. The fact I got 880 on my SAT didn't register with him. He was like, this kid's going to be a doctor. I don't, whatever it takes.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
I, they wouldn't let me. So at that point, my parents were like, "You're not going to drop your chemistry class for the drums. So we'll see if we can pick it up next semester." And I was like, I'm not doing this. I can't do it.
Right.
Well, I got out of Towson and I went to community college for a while, and that's where I started to really uh,
That's
flounder.
University of Maryland, Baltimore.
Yeah, I
Yes.
floundered around a bit with trying to play the drums,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what all this meant. How was I gonna make money? Um, but I always had that that base at home. And I haven't mentioned my mother, but she was the steadfast, like she was a teacher, elementary school teacher, and she was always there every week, go to church, active in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always had the opportunities there for anything that I wanted to do except for music. So I was just trying to find my way. So went through community college, did some classes there, and then I was like, all right, I got to cut out of here. I got to get out of this small town, and decided to move down to Florida. Had some friends that were like, hey, we're going to Florida for the summer. We're going to work at Disney World. Uh,
Yeah.
like, well, that I have a couple bucks. That seems okay. So we went down there. University of Central Florida had auditions. The first thing they did was they sat me down and they gave me a job. I grew up roller skating. They were like, "Oh, you can roller skate? We got all these. We got this restaurant that all the waiters wear roller skates. So that's where you're gonna work." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." But my buddy was trying out for. They had a casting call for the characters, and I
At
was like,
Disney World.
"Yeah, at Disney World." So I was
Right.
like, well, I'll go with him and see what that's all about. So I went with him, and it was like this big gym at University of Central Florida, full of people, and they gave us like, "Oh, do this little dance routine." I told you I was into hip hop. I did some break dancing when I was a kid. Before I was going to be a drummer, I was going to be a professional break dancer. Break in and Breaking Two Electric Boogaloo came out, so and I wasn't all that good. But I knew how to do a little bit. So they gave us a little routine, and then I got called back. Then the group's smaller. Then they gave us a little more complicated thing, and I was like, "Is this all dancing?" And then the group got smaller, and then they asked us to like act out using big motions because when you're a character, you can't use your voice.
Mm.
You can only gesture. You can. So you have to be really big. And so I just went over the top with it, and they selected me to be a character at Disney World.
So what character were you?
So they go in height ranges. So you know what? We could get in trouble. We're giving away the secrets. I was goofy height characters. So because I've never quite hit 6 foot, I've been a 5'11" and a half for most of my life. So I never put 6 feet on my driver's license, but they go goofy height and then um, uh, chip or what's the guy's name? There's chipmunks, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's ducks and mice. Like those are the
The
usually
shorter folks.
yeah. So Goofy Height was like Brer Bear and the Big Bad Wolf, and of course Goofy. And I had no designs on moving out of Florida. I didn't know what I was going to continue to do, but my
Mm-hmm.
mother begged me. She said, "Please just finish your degree." It was the '90s, and it was still really, really important. It's
Mm-hmm.
less important now. Um, in some areas, especially in sales. When I've done all the hiring that I've done throughout my career, it's never been a criteria for me to have a college degree to hire someone. But she convinced me. She filled out an application for me. She was like, "You're going. Like you're gonna finish up." I hated it so much that I finished even with starting at Towson, then going to community college, and then going to I graduated from Frostburg State University. It was up in Western Maryland. I got out in 3.5 years. I just wanted to keep going, keep going, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Thing that got me through doing all the things that I wasn't really all that interested in doing was listening, going to class, taking copious notes, listening, right? I learned that from my father. Teaching, I would then take all that stuff and boil it down to something that made sense. And all my buddies that never went to class, I would say, "Hey, it's study group time." And I would teach them based on everything that I had learned. I broke down what were the key components, and
Mm-hmm.
they would get good grades. So that it worked for them, it worked for me. I'm a scatterbrain. I can't remember anything. If I don't write it down, I'm probably not going to remember it. So I just started doing that. And it was just like, hey, I can remember things. I can take things that seem really complex and boil it down and teach it to other people. So
Mm-hmm.
what what should I be? I don't really have
So
any
in
idea.
that process, in that whole process from Towson to University of Maryland, Baltimore to Blues Alley to trying to be on the A band to being goofy, being goofy at Disney World, you found what you were really good at.
I, I didn't realize it at the time. But I graduate college and I'm floundering. Like I have no idea. I start substitute teaching.
Yeah.
I go to my dad's store. He doesn't need anybody. I'm just like, who should I go talk to? He's lining me up with people that he knows because
Mm-hmm.
the man that sells the suits knows all the guys in town that
Mm-hmm.
wear the suits, right?
That's
And
right.
those guys usually, so I I went to a trucking company interview, great trucking company, Bowman Trucking, still out of Western Maryland. Didn't get that job. Didn't have any computer skills. I went. He sent me to insurance nationwide. I couldn't pass the test. Like you gotta do an aptitude test. I couldn't pass the
Mm-hmm.
test. So they're like, sorry. Well, my dad's name was Jim. They're like, sorry, Jim. He's got to pass the test. That didn't work out because in order to sell the insurance, you have to have a certain
Sure.
aptitude. I was like, man, what should I do? So I went to OCS for the Navy. Like I showed up at the Navy recruiting office, and this is 91, 92, not a whole lot going on. So they were able to be a little bit more selective. I took the test for OCS. I should have just enlisted. I'm glad I didn't, based on where I am today. But
Mm-hmm.
every little thing that happens is a stepping stone. But I couldn't pass
Sure.
the test. I didn't do well on the test, so I was like, so I was just out with some friends, and there are key people in your life
Mm-hmm.
that you meet, and I met this guy, and he had a phone in his hand. I never had a cell phone. He had a cell phone, but he was incredibly enthusiastic about this. It was just a cell phone. I was like, what? Okay, that's fine. And it was this new technology where they had rolled your pager and your phone and your voicemail all into the same thing. And
Mm.
like I was excited just hearing him talk about it. And you know how, just as excited as I would get watching Peter Erskine play the drums in Blues Alley, because Peter Erskine is just in it and he just believes it. And
Mm.
this guy just had that effect on me. And, you find mentors, sometimes you don't go seeking them, but
Mm.
I got to know this gentleman and, to this day we're friends, and he just had that knack that my dad had, and he had for really connecting with people, and he had that enthusiasm, and he saw opportunity everywhere. And he said, "Hey, just come come to this place." The place ended up being the Radio Shack at the mall, the Valley Mall in Hagerstown, Maryland. He said, "I'll set you up." It was getting close to Christmas time. He said, "We'll get you on part time, and you just stand in Radio Shack, and this is our phone, and this is how the older phones work. The older phones, they were just cellular, but this was the all in one."
Mm.
And they handed us the map. Everybody wanted to know, well, okay, where's the coverage map? It used to be really important. Where can I get coverage, especially in a place like rural Maryland, and
Mm.
down into West Virginia and up into Pennsylvania. All the businesses would travel, and we really only worked on the highways. Like once you got off the highway, if you were trying our new technology, it wouldn't work.
Mm.
But he showed me how to do it, and he just connected with people, and the product was packaged just so that it just looked nicer than the other cell phones. It was newer technology, but it didn't work as well, and it wasn't cheaper, and it was new to the market. So I'm in Radio Shack, and I called it slinging phones. I was just like slinging phones, just trying to figure it out. But I just started listening, and I watched this guy do what he did, and I started listening to the manager of the Radio Shack store, and he was like, "Hey, we have this thing called Cover All Your Bases. It's a scorecard for our salespeople." I was like, "Well, okay, what's that all?" "Well, we make it fun for them. We make it a competition. Somebody comes in for one thing, then there's probably some other things that that we could lead them to, and
Mm-hmm.
you, it's something that's going to benefit them. You're not leading them to circuitry if they're only
Right.
looking for a radio controlled car, but there are things that they teach them. Hey, you could start here. If this is something that you like, then you might want to look at this as well." So I started to look at connecting, one to one connecting, and then adding value. Okay. And really just listening. Okay, what are your concerns? And the biggest concerns were coming with, well, you don't have coverage, right? So I immediately had to learn how to position, overcome objections. Uh,
Mm.
this is new. I want to take away your old thing and make you try something new. It's a cell phone, so you're signing up for a plan. We're going to run your credit check. Um, so I just stood there in the mall, and it just kept learning and learning and learning and listening, not just to the people that were teaching me. You got to know about the product. You have to be
Mm-hmm.
enthusiastic about what you're selling. If you're not, you will get punched in the face. It
Mm.
doesn't work. If you don't believe it, no one else is going to believe it. But that enthusiasm from that gentleman, it had infected me, and I believed it, and it was a good thing because it ended up being it. Today it is Sprint, right? At the
Wow.
time, it was called Sprint Spectrum. No one had ever seen it,
Mm.
and my guy left the company, but he showed me a lot of things, and I learned a lot of things, and they promoted me, gave me a full-time role and put me in B2B. And they're just like, I was like, all right, is there training? What do we do here? And they're like, just get into the yellow pages, man. And just
Wow.
just start calling businesses, and well, what do I say to them? Just ask them if they ever put their cell phone service out for bid. And so I'd ask them that, and it was pretty easy for them to just say nope, and then hang up the phone.
Click. Yeah.
So I was just like, I have to figure out what to say.
Yeah.
So quickly I was like, okay, so this cold calling thing, it works a little bit. It's a volume play. Back then, numbers game. I still believe sales can be a numbers game, but not the same numbers that you think. Uh,
Mm.
I had to learn, I had to figure it out. So I went back to my dad's store. My dad knows everybody. So how do I ask for a referral? How do I get referred into a business? So he got me, the leg in, and then I had to learn how to value sell and overcome objections. And it started to work really well. They gave me a bigger territory. I moved into Pennsylvania, but my dad didn't know to me. They had their own men's clothing store. So I went to a little jewelry shop, just went back to my roots. So just walk in the door, introduce yourself. And I mean, it was a gold mine. I went in this jewelry shop, and to this day, I have bought every diamond that I've ever purchased for my wife from this little jewelry shop
Wow.
in Greencastle,
Wow.
Pennsylvania. But the guy who owned the shop, he had that gift, and he knew everybody. And I just created a referral program just for him. I was like, hey,
Mm.
you send me somebody, and I have these coupons. I'll just keep bringing you these coupons. He never paid for a bill ever, and he just kept giving me people. So there, I figured out, okay, referrals, relationships. This is
Mm.
business. I went from business to in Radio Shack, from me to you, and you got to figure out, okay, who else in the business is making the decision? The one thing that happened at Radio Shack that made all the difference, and this is very important, I met a girl. She was walking around the mall. She spotted me. She kind of knew me. It's a small town. But we decided that we were right for one another. She
Mm-hmm.
graduated college. We decided to move together to Frederick, Maryland. And it got
Yep.
a little bit tedious for me because I was already on the road. And then she got into a position with a company that wanted her, that they owned 11 or 12 child care centers. So
Mm-hmm.
she's an educator, she's a teacher, but they were offering a lot more money. It's a private school, private company, but they wanted her to. She was going from Frederick, Maryland to Fairfax, Virginia, every morning.
That's about 50 miles,
You're
35,
walking
a
down here. It's 50 miles,
lot
but
of
it's
traffic.
minutes than
Yeah.
50 minutes. Yeah, traffic around
Yeah.
here, even in the 90s. So I was like, I got to figure. So I just started applying for jobs. AOL was down here, and a couple others, just swing and a miss, swing and a miss. They're like, this guy sells cell phones. What could he possibly know?
Mm-hmm.
A couple of smart guys that I graduated high school with. They had graduated college with engineering degrees. They went the big five path, and my one buddy was like, I just can't have a boss, so I'm going to start a company, and we feel like there's a lot of business around here. He had a partner, and he was like, Chad, can you be the sales guy? I was
Mm.
like, you're in Fairfax. I'm your sales guy. So then I'm down here. Okay, new environment. What have I learned? All right, I can open up the phone book. I can figure out what our value is, figure out what position we have in the market and why it's valuable to other people. I can get out and start networking. So I do all those things. And we're not quite sure what we are. We have no idea what we're doing. We're in our mid 20s. And we were going to be a Microsoft certified partner. Well, we were one, but we were just going to, any services that anybody needs around anything Microsoft, we can do it. So we got like little websites. I went to the company that my wife worked for, and I was like, hey, let us do your website for you. So we did their website. And then I don't know if you remember in 2020, they called it the dot bomb, or sorry, in 2000, they called it the dot bomb. And
Mm-hmm.
all these .com businesses.
Yes.
Our company actually had .com in the name. Our website was terrible. We weren't really a .com or an e-commerce or anything, but it was cool to have that in your name. And everything just flattened. Everything stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So we were like just trying to figure out how to survive. Same thing. Well, instead of the yellow pages, I went to the leadership directory. I started dialing the phone. We put there was a CRM system called ACT, and it was terrible. But it was a place to keep all of our contacts. And I was like, just putting them in ACT, and I'd call them, set them up for the day, call them. But in the leadership directories, I was just starting with American Association. A lot of associations were in the beginning of those leadership directories. I was calling through, and it turns out when there's a downturn or a hiccup in the economy, associations can get a little bit of a lift because there's continuing education opportunities, there's job boards. So we got a job with, American Association of whatever it was. They wanted us to create an information architecture. Well, I didn't have any idea what that was. The smart guys did, but they were also working on some of the other projects that we got. So I became de facto project manager. So what did I have to do? I had to go in there, listen, what systems do you have? What are your business processes? Where are the gaps? What's working for you? What are you spending on this? So just because I had to, just in there, shut my mouth, open my ears, ask good questions, ask follow-on questions. What other problems does that arise from that? And so I'm doing this, and I'm like, I need somebody to help me sell, because now I have to implement, and I'm in charge of this. And they're looking at, hey, we like what you guys are doing. We'd like you to help us fix this system over here. And so, okay, now it's important for me to figure out, how do you hire a salesperson?
Wow. So now you have to develop your team.
Just like, do I hire somebody and say, open up the leadership directory? No. So I'm seeing this information architecture, and I'm like, there's nothing like this for sales. Like, there's no blueprint. There's people hire a salesperson and they say, go sell, right? I did it. Founders they do it the most. And a great majority of the customers that I work with, they're trying to move from founder-led sales. The founder maybe does 75% of the sales. They have the enthusiasm. They don't know what the secret sauce is. They haven't written any of it down. So passing that off becomes a bit of a burden, and how you pass it off. So I took what we were doing with technology, and I was like, I'll just create a system. And then when I get the new guy in, I'll show him the system. I'll do just like the guy at Radio Shack did with me. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to cold call until I get somebody to agree to have a meeting, and then he'll know exactly how to do it. Anything doesn't work, if our messaging is off, or I'm just going to write down whatever isn't resonating or what is resonating. And the whole time I'm not thinking about any of this stuff. I'm just like, I need to write this down because I won't remember it if I don't write it down. Wow. And I can't get the study group together and simplify it for them if I haven't written it down and figured it out myself. So we fast forward a little bit. We're trying to be everything to everyone. And then we start, so big mistake. You can't start a business that way. You can't be all things to all people. But we're saying yes, yes, yes to everything. But it turned out we went down the path of doing practice managers. So we're going to have this practice for Microsoft SharePoint. We're going to have this practice in the associations. There was a niche that we found. We're going to have this practice for this niche. And once we got that focused, that's when things really started to take off. It's just like proceduralize, focus, get very distinct about the value that you're providing, and it will start to resonate instead of all things to all people. We did have, and in the meantime, we took on a client that almost took us out. It was one of those too big a job to refuse. Everybody wants to go bigger, and it almost wiped us out. In the meantime, we're trying to focus on these things. That company ended up splitting off into two. One is still in business, thriving. The other one became a government contractor and then got acquired by another government contractor. It was all because we focused, we figured out how to sell. And then we wrote it down and taught other people how to do it. So there's all these things along the way where founders, I was not the guy that put up any money to start this business. I don't want to misrepresent that. But as the first seller, it's like, what are the things that I do that don't work at all? And make sure that no one else does that. But more importantly, what's the anatomy of a win? How did we do this? How did we get them to become a lead? How did we get them to agree to there being enough value for them to spend time with us to have a discovery conversation. From there, how did we align our value to what it is that their needs are in the business? Negotiating, closing, those things do become secondary whenever you do when you check the right boxes up front, when you're inquisitive enough and you inquire enough and you get deep enough on what the issues are. Closing, it's never secondary, but like when I'm hiring people, I never look for closers. I look for curiosity. I look for coachability. Like anybody who I will interview and then I'll ask at the end, hey, how do you think that went? I'll do like a little role play with them. If they say, I think I hit it out of the park, they might not be coachable. Like you need to dig a little. People that they want to learn, like they feed on it. You see it a lot with athletes. You see it with other people too. I've always participated in sports, but that's about as far as it goes. I'm no athlete, but like with music, with drums, like you just have to keep doing it over and over again. You want to learn, you want to get better,
Right.
you want
Right.
to talk to people that are better than you at it and learn from them. So all of those things, they all tend to start to line up, and I'm like, oh, okay. So what I do is I take things that seem to be overly complicated, sales processes, getting your message out there, figuring out how to go about it, from the words you say to the follow-ups to the way that you price your products. This all becomes somewhat unmanageable with small business, especially the founder is incredibly enthusiastic. They start to sell, and then they have their relationships and they have their friends, and then they have their enthusiasm because it's theirs. It's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you then impart that off to someone else? What works? What doesn't work? So that you can then proceduralize it, be able to rely on it to be consistent.
Yeah.
For whatever growth goals you have. If you want to move into other markets, if you want to just take, this is what we do, and now we just want to put it on repeat. How do we scale? How do we bring in the same successful salesperson every time? Like right down to, hey, what are the traits? I use 10 traits. I mentioned a few of them: curiosity, tenacity. There are myriad others, but coachability being the big
Sure.
people that want to get better. So how do you take all that stuff and figure out what works? So there's all these training programs out there, and I've gone through a ton of them. There's Sandler, there's the Challenger, there's Winning by Design is very engineering focused, like they just break it down into steps and stages, and no one size fits all. It's
Right.
I've never seen it. Process. It's really all about who are the people that you have. More importantly, what is your position in the market? How do you go to, what do your customers actually think about you, right? What do your customers view as their competitive alternatives, like the real ones? Like if I cease to exist, what would you do, right?
Right.
And you get answers that you might not expect. Sometimes it's like, well, I would just do it on a spreadsheet and I would hire an intern. And then maybe you weren't providing that much value to begin with.
Right.
But if the answer was, I don't really know. Like you're a trusted resource. This is exactly what we need. Figuring out, okay, what is that special sauce, and how do you take that and teach a new salesperson or an existing salesperson, but teach them how to impart that value and really dig and listen for, hey, what are the things that are going to lead this person to, being a good fit for what it is that we can provide. So
Right.
I feel like I've rambled on a bit.
Yeah, it's one of the things is that usually as business owners, as you know this, you're a sales guy, but I'm sure you know the owner, you in this podcast you refer to founders,
Mm-hmm.
obviously owners of entrepreneurial endeavors, they fall in love with a product or they fall in love with their service, and they see it from their point of view.
Mhm.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is you in order to be effectively sell your product, is you got to understand it from the customer's perspective. What is it that they want? What is it that they are looking for? And then you learn to speak the language that they can hear, that they can receive, as opposed to maybe, and it may be different than what comes out of your mouth. In other words, you either can create the need or you can feed the need. And
Right.
often we try to create the need. This is what you need. This is the greatest thing ever. This is how you want to do it. And sometimes customers are not there.
Right.
Right. And those are two different types of sales that you're trying to do, right? Two different types of products that you're trying to sell. You speak to that a little bit?
And you said it best. Founders and owners, for good reason, because they put their heart and soul into a product or a service.
Mm-hmm.
They need to teach their sellers how to fall in love with the problem, and that's really, why did you,
Mm-hmm.
I know that the product does all these things, and every company I've ever worked for had really good, that where I came in as, I started to get into larger organizations because I wanted to expand my reach, and came in at like director level, and this company was in love with the product, and they had just acquired another product to sort of
Mm-hmm.
try to staple on to their core product. And for almost a month, I was in product training. Like there, I was just like, hey, I'm here to help people sell. So I need to start assessing the sales skills. I need to look at everyone's pipeline. I need to find out how they're moving somebody from an opportunity that is a best case to a committed opportunity. Like
Mm-hmm.
I need to help these people. I need to get on the phones, right? And they're just like product, 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 product. And like I never really got that close to the problem. I got a good opportunity to go to a customer conference, and that's where I learned about the problem. So I think people don't spend enough time really just being curious with their customers. What was it that made you want to start doing business with me? I know we've been doing business for 3 years. Not what keeps you doing business with me, but when it was me or some other thing, what was it, right? And whether that's some level of expertise or something unique, you may not have even thought about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That value came across to them, and understanding that is paramount. So we talk about sales process, and the first place that I always start is not, well, okay, what is your what does your opportunity pipeline look like? It's product market fit. It is how do you go? How do you view yourself, and more importantly, how do your customers view your position in the market? What's your
Mm-hmm.
market category? Your law firm, litigation, small business. I don't want to misrepresent. Um,
Oh, I correct you. No worries.
right, right. So there's a market category there, and then
Mm-hmm.
below the surface, it's like, okay, so everyone knows what category to put you in. It's a whole different thing to try to be a category leader and create a new category.
Yeah.
Uh, that's harder, but can be very rewarding. But what sort of box do people want to put you in? And then what exactly is it that makes you unique to them specifically? And how do you
Mm-hmm.
prove that value when you've just met, right? Whether it's social proof, testimonials, having the experience, being knowledgeable, showing up. I don't want to say that product knowledge is not important. It is incredibly important. You have
Yes.
to know 10 times more than you're actually going to say to a customer about your product. The most important thing is knowing what is it specifically for them
Mm-hmm.
that's going to solve a problem. Like, what is
Yes.
the biggest pain? Because
Mm-hmm.
products and services, they they you could solve a lot of problems for a lot of people, and you can be everything to, but then you're not really anything. If you're not listening, some of the Sandler training techniques uh, is really about thinking about when you go to the doctor. You go to the doctor, you say you have a headache. They don't just prescribe you something stronger than Tylenol. They dig a little deeper, and you're perfectly willing to let them do that,
Yes.
right? Well, are you sleeping well? Are you dizzy? Did it just come on? Has it been going on for a long time? Is it the front? So they get you all the way to the point where, oh, we probably want to get a CAT scan on you, and where you thought you were gonna, just dole out a couple bucks for a prescription, you're now ready to write a check no matter how big it is, to make sure that you don't have a brain tumor. And if you do, how you're going to go about, moving to the next step and
Sure.
alleviating yourself of this problem. But if you skip all the stuff in between and you don't understand what the problem really is, you're never going to get there. So it's again just going back to knowing how to ask the right questions, dig a little bit deeper, and listening to those things,
Yeah.
repeating them back so that the person that you're speaking with knows that you heard them correctly. I never get it right the first time.
Sure.
Uh, I always make sure, okay, so what I heard is this and this and this.
Hmm.
Did I get anything wrong? And then when you get onto something that's very important, seems very important, then you say, okay, um, anything else? What else you
Yes.
got? So you start to think, okay, all I got to do is help my new seller understand what our unique position is in the market. And then I can bring them on and they can sell. Well, that's table stakes.
Mm.
You need to understand that. You need to be able to articulate how you talk about it, how they're going to pick up the phone and actually, dial someone who's never heard from you before, how they're going to articulate enough value that that person will agree to take a meeting. Um, they take a meeting. Okay, how are they going to, what line of questioning is most important to be of value to the customer, understand what their problem might be, have the willingness to say, I don't think it's a good fit, and I'll let you know, right? What structure will you, give them? What guardrails? Because you want people to use their creativity and bring their creativity, but there always has to be a baseline, especially if you're going to want to hire more than one salesperson. I
Sure.
have a client that hired two, right? Just right out of the gate. We got two. They're remote. We got to figure out what they're going to do. So it's like, okay, what are they going to say? Where's the data going to come from? Where are the leads
Yeah.
come from? How are you articulating that value on the website? Are you giving away enough value? Because as well as I do, you do a podcast that you're giving away value,
Hmm.
and this is incredibly valuable. Hopefully, it is for folks out there, and they know that you're willing to give away all kinds of stuff to build that relationship. And if you never do business with me,
Yeah.
um, you're going to get value out of this
Right.
conversation,
Right.
and really imparting that on sellers and disconnecting it from what we sell is a gap that is often, you know,
Sure.
it's
Sure.
difficult to
Sure.
close that gap.
Yeah. Chad, that's been that's awesome information that you provided. I want to kind of take you back briefly, and you don't have to get into too much of the details, but you said something about at one point your company took on a contract or an opportunity that was too large,
Yeah,
right? Um, and any small business or any business for that matter uh, understands, appreciate when you can't say no. It's hard to say no. You can, I should say, you can say no. And sometimes the smartest thing to do is to say no in order to grow, right?
yeah,
But that's easier said than when you're looking at your cash flow or your statements, and you might not be in a position to say no. Can you kind of tell us why? Again, if I get into too much detail about that specifically, Why taking on a or opportunity that was too big for you at the time a mistake?
Everything's a trade-off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people don't realize it. So when you focus your attention in one place, everyone wants to say that they can multitask. I've
Mm-hmm.
I've been willing to say for most of my life that I am a horrible multitasker.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm doing something over here on my phone, you better know that I'm not hearing anything that you're saying.
Mm.
It's I can't do it. Now I think
Mm-hmm.
other people are better at it than me, but when you get into a situation where you you everything always looks rosy on paper. It's like, yes,
Sure.
we can deliver. I know I can deliver this. I can do this in my sleep. Um, when you don't dig enough into the detail during a sales process to understand, what the outputs need to be, um, and what your inputs are going to need to be, it's if those things aren't exactly in your wheelhouse, and
Mm-hmm.
you got to go scramble and learn something new to figure out how to do it, and then the requirements change. um, all of the work that you may have done around focusing attention on the right fit clients, um, can start to go by the wayside. Right, one giant project can really ruin all the momentum that you're getting with some of the smaller ones. So that's why I always, back to sales process again. The first part of understanding your sales playbook, if you will, is, you start with the positioning, the product market fit, and then who are our ideal clients.
Yes.
I learned this the wrong way
Mm.
by saying everyone's our ideal client, and then
Anyone
years
who's paying.
years
Anyone who's
later
paying
figured
is the
out,
ideal
oh,
client.
this
Yeah.
one very specific type of client is because you just keep doing it over and over and
Yeah.
over and over and over again, and it's the only way to get better and to understand.
Yeah.
Uh, so defining, we call it fishing in a smaller pond. You define something very discrete, and it's much easier to have a point of view, which is the next thing. Okay, given your market category, your unique value, and this ideal client, uh, what's your point of view? Like what are you offering? In some ways, how do you differentiate? In other ways, how are you doing things differently? But what have you learned that has brought you to here that can help them to see, hey, maybe your point of view is really what we need. We need a different point of view. No one really engages unless they've got a problem, right?
Sure.
And but if you try to engage somebody that doesn't have a problem, you're trying to grow your business. You want to reach out to leads. You want to, try to drum up some interest. Sometimes you have to show people that they have a problem that they didn't know they had.
Right.
That's
Right.
where point of view becomes very important. And when you're not very distinct, saying, "Hey, uh, we we had this, these 10 manufacturers were facing this problem, and we found that that 100% of them moved in this direction, and we were able to help them with this, which is distinctly the position that
Yeah.
you're in. You're not in distribution. You're specifically in manufacturing. Then you have a point of view, and people want to
Yeah.
really work up and
Yeah.
listen to what you have to say.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think that, I mean, obviously I see it in the legal practice, but in other businesses where, businesses, I think, try to diversify too quickly.
Hmm.
And basically what's happening is, and there's an opportunity, let's go, and sometimes in attempting to do that, either they don't have the bandwidth,
Hmm.
right? So they put themselves in jeopardy of not necessarily doing a good job in the new area that they're now into. That's one, and as well as I do, the number one thing in sales is do a damn good job, so that they keep using you, right? I mean, I know we haven't quite said that, but that's the number one thing about sales, right? Is that you want it to be repeatable, particularly you start with that same client. You want that contract or whatever to be repeatable, which means you have to do a good job,
Right.
right? And sometimes we diversify in attempt to grow, or sometimes we diversify because because the business is afraid to say no because money is money, at least, and it kind of as you just kind of alluded to, Chad, you're trying to build a niche market over here, but the bigger opportunity came and it took y'all away from focusing on what ultimately would be a bigger, not wouldn't be one client, but a bigger market for you.
Right.
And that's, like you said, and that's kind of the things that one has to balance. So, all right, we're toward the end of this podcast. So, like I sometimes do, I try not to be too predictable in my podcast. 3 lessons. The 3 lessons that you would, that if a business owner was speaking with you, the 3 lessons that you learned that you'll want to share to a business owner.
Yep. Take every person and system to the point where the efficiency starts to wane. So what I mean by that, a lot of companies they'll hire five salespeople, and they'll say, hey, if we did this once, we can scale. We can do it 5 more times. But it turns out they don't have enough authority over their total addressable market to prioritize the leads and the accounts to reach out to, and so you end up with a whole bunch of people just trying to go after whatever they possibly can, scraping and clawing. Just go get money, go get work. I don't care where it is. So you get to a point where you've got enough going on, one salesperson, possibly 2 salespeople that have a procedure. They've proved that they can hit a certain number that is a threshold, right? Whether that's, okay, I've got 2 salespeople and they are each hitting 5 meetings a day. That's probably too much. But at that point, when your salespeople are just like, okay, we can't take anymore, that's when you add a salesperson. It doesn't work. It doesn't work the other way around. You have to prove that you can get the business in the door. Fall in love with the problem and articulate that to the people that you bring in. And as much as possible, and this is very, very difficult for founders, write down what works, right? Or have someone assist you with writing down what works. Let people ask you questions about, hey, where'd you get that lead? How'd you get that lead? I don't know. It's just a friend of mine. Okay, well, what did you say to them, right? Impart that knowledge, get it out into the universe, because people aren't just going to pick it up through osmosis. They can't just follow you around and figure it out. If it's not written down, it's not going to be repeatable, and it's not teachable if you don't write it down. Some people don't learn just by observing. I have to observe, I have to listen, I have to write it, I have to repeat it. I've found in my career working with tons of sellers, and me being one myself, if I don't hear it like 7 times, and my wife will attest to this, it's probably hasn't sunk in yet. So just make sure that it's something that you can repeat. And every client that I work with, that I talk to, whether they end up doing business with me or not, I give them, hey, this is everything that you would need. Just like, here's a sales playbook. Here's the questions you can ask yourself. What do we ask people on a qualification call? How do we get new leads in the door? What are we to our market? What sales training do we provide, if any at all? So what is the process that we go about? So all of those things are necessary, especially if you're expecting to bring in, a sales leader or a salesperson and have them be able to do their jobs effectively.
Awesome. So we never even spoke about your current company. Is it Chad Baker LLC?
It is. It's easy to remember.
There you go.
I haven't come up with anything better, so I guess we'll just stick with that. And It's pretty new. Although I started the business a while back, I did it part-time for a while. So I only
Mm-hmm.
jumped in feet first pretty recently. So got a handful of clients, and I'm just so happy to be able to help people.
Sure.
Um, and I really am trying to get more focused locally here. Throughout my career, I've worked remote for a long time, so I know people all over the country. So I'm
Sure.
working with folks in Idaho right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to get local. I want to get face to face. So, let's go for coffee. Let's talk about sales. I'm happy to do it with anyone.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chad, for giving us your time and your valuable insights. And you and I, we will connect. So I look forward to seeing you soon and actually hearing you play that guitar back there. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Kicking Ass and Taking Names. Remember, information is only as good as its application. So apply these insights and strategies and start making transformational changes to your business and life today. If you have not already, please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and YouTube. Keep kicking ass and taking names.